to come back to our interview for a few minutes before we take you back to the Supreme Court for the proceedings that have been going on. That we have, of course, been live at that event for you. And I want to bring you back here to studio to a discussion on the Nairobi and indeed the Kenya that we want to be able to, well, go through the 6-point plan that we had been discussing before. Of course, now we have talked about housing, we have talked about open spaces, not just in Nairobi, but across the country and what has happened to them. We now want to go on to third point and this time talk about transport.
Yes, so our third point, of course, is about mass rapid transit and non-motorized transport. And I think we were talking about this before earlier with you, that over 50% of urban dwellers, case in point Nairobi, actually walk or cycle to work. About 27% then go by public means, the ones who do use vehicles, and only 15% use private cars. But when you look at our our infrastructure and how we've invested in it, we're actually investing a lot in roads and not in public transit. If you go to the developed world, you find there's a lot of investment in mass transit, ensuring that people are able to move efficiently, in a manner that in a safe manner. And the reason why many Kenyans actually go up and end up buying cars beyond the cultural expectation,
and cars which they can't afford to own and run. Yes,
cars they can't afford to own and run is because it's inconveniencing to use public transport. It's inconveniencing to walk because pedestrian walkways are not provided. You cannot cross safely, say for example, on the roads, just in terms of that planning. So it is important that we think, and I'm happy to note that at least there's a plan for commuter rail for Nairobi and bus rapid transit. But we must fast track these processes. We must invest in pedestrian and cycling paths for cyclists, because you find a lot of even the roads that are coming up, and there's been a lot of activity in this sector, are not giving the equitable distribution of resources to pedestrians and cyclists who are forming almost 60%.
The bulk of the commuters.
Yes. So this is something that we have identified. The other one is ease of doing business. As professionals, we're finding it more and more difficult to do business in Nairobi. There are too many agencies, too many regulatory authorities at different points. So by the time you're able to actually get an approval and get to the ground and build, you've had to go through 4 or 5 agencies at different points, all sometimes asking for the same thing. And we're saying, can we have a one-stop shop where, as a building developer, I can go to one place, and if I'm acting like as an architect on behalf of a developer, I go to one place and I get all my approvals in one place. The other thing is the cost of this, because a lot of it, especially in Nairobi and Mombasa, is very expensive. It's not supposed to be a tax. You're not supposed to be taxing developers. It's supposed to be a service. So I'm supposed to pay for just a fair amount, a token amount. It is. I think in the last 5 years, it went up by about 1,000% of what we used to pay five years ago. This is a deterrent. And what do developers do? They don't absorb this cost. They'll transfer it down, and the end user, who is the homeowner, who is the tenant, is the one who will pay for this.
Talk to us about, sorry to interrupt, talk to us about automation of that system and the fact that this has taken so long. I've seen instances of developers who have been told to trace previous owners who sold off plots 20, 30 years ago, and you have to run around the country incurring costs looking for a person who might even be dead just to prove ownership.
And that is a good point. As the association at AAK, at least for purposes of construction permit, we've worked hand in hand with the county governments, that is Nairobi, Kiambu, Kisumu and Mombasa. They've automated their process, but that is only one angle. We're saying, can all the agencies, can the Ministry of Lands, in terms of getting a survey plan from Survey of Kenya, all these need to be automated. Kenya is at the forefront of the digitization wave. We are famous for M-Pesa. This is really, we can crack this and make it even that much easier for people to build, as it were. Yes.
Next point.
Effective development control. This one cannot be overemphasized. I talked about it earlier, collapse of buildings. It is important that county governments do their role in terms of ensuring that persons who are putting up buildings illegally are put to book.
Do we enforce zonings? Because I know that the special development plans emphasize zones which declare what sort of buildings should be in which areas and what should be where.
Exactly.
But we are enforcing it.
Yes, that's a challenge. For example, Nairobi only has 15 enforcement officers, and there are, at any one time, there are about 16,000 live building sites. Wow. That is not it is humanly not possible. So we're looking at, can automation assist in that? But beyond that is also the culture of impunity and corruption. So almost 70% of buildings in Nairobi do not go through legal system to be approved. They actually put up illegally. So we must, the agencies, National Construction Authority must be given adequate enforcement officers. County government must employ enough enforcement officers to make this work. Yes.
Finally, talk to us about, first, the dignity of a person living in Kenya. The sort of universal, so to say, safety net that a Kenyan should expect to maintain your dignity, be able to have a degree of some sort of degree of quality of life, so that we stop seeing the corruption and the all-out corrupting that we are seeing and the sort of impunity that characterizes life in Nairobi and other places. Yes,
and we had alluded to this earlier on, just saying how we must change as a people. We must, you know, if you want to see change, you must start. The change starts with you. Yes. In terms of the dignity of a Kenyan, when you look at these 6 points, I think we're ranking very poorly. Majority of our people are not living in spaces that would be called quality. They're not going to schools and getting the quality of education that they should get. They're not getting the quality of healthcare. And somehow at the center of all this is a culture of impunity and greed, because the plans are there, but where is the money going to? Everybody. I'm not only talking about the leaders at the top. It starts with everyone, you know. So we must, as a people, must dawn on us that we need to change our country if we're to get the Kenya that we want. It starts with each and every one of you.
Okay, indeed, the sobering sentiments, they're coming from you, Madam, because essentially these are the things that we have been fighting all the last 6 months, all the elections, all the going out on the streets. Essentially, comes down to these 6 points, and hoping that our leaders and our people are indeed paying attention and should be able to do something about it. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us here.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Well, on that note, I want to hand you back to my colleague, Gabriagina, who is standing by on Mombasa Road. Of course, the discussion here has been about the Kenya that we want, and that 6-point plan by the Architectural Association of Kenya, just collapsing everything that has been a challenge for most people here in Kenya into something that is easy to deal with and be able to do something about and take this country forward. Abby.